Alright, picture this, you're on a boat, sailing across the open ocean. It's peaceful. The waves are gently rocking you, and everything feels like a perfect day. But then, out of nowhere, a colossal, snow-capped mountain emerges from the water, piercing through the clouds like some ancient sea god just decided to drop the tallest peak on Earth smack in the middle of the ocean. That's right, what if Mount Everest, all 29,032 feet of it, was suddenly plopped right into the deep blue? What would happen? Would it sink? Would it create a new ecosystem? And most importantly, could you still climb it without needing scuba gear? Let's dive into it. Pun absolutely intended. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this ridiculous but fascinating question, let's just appreciate what we're dealing with. Mount Everest, the roof of the world, the final frontier for adventurous climbers, the place where oxygen levels are so low, your body basically starts giving up on you. This giant is currently sitting comfortably in the Himalayas, where tectonic plates have been pushing it higher and higher for millions of years. But what if, for some absurd reason, maybe a geological game of shuffleboard, it got relocated to the middle of the Pacific or the Atlantic? Would it still be the Everest we know, or would the ocean completely change the game? Alright, first things first. If you were somehow able to take Mount Everest and teleport it into the ocean, you'd have a very big splash. Think tsunamis on a scale we've never seen before. We're talking about waves that would make Hollywood disaster movies look like a kiddie pool incident. Displacing that much water, roughly a few 100 trillion gallons, would send massive shockwaves in every direction, potentially devastating coastlines around the world. And let's not forget about wildlife. If you're a fish just minding your own business, 1 second you're swimming peacefully, the next second there's a mountain falling on your head. Not ideal. The sheer impact alone would create massive disruptions in marine ecosystems, wiping out anything unlucky enough to be nearby. But let's assume, after the initial chaos, things settle down. Now we have the tallest mountain in the world rising out of the ocean like a misplaced titan. What happens next? This is where things get interesting. The ocean isn't just deep, it's ridiculously deep. The deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, is about 36,000 feet deep, which is deeper than Everest is tall. So technically, if you dropped Everest into the deepest part of the ocean, its peak wouldn't even break the surface. But let's assume we place it somewhere shallower, where at least part of it is sticking out of the water. The problem is mountains are not designed to float. Everest isn't some giant iceberg. It's a massive pile of rock, and rocks are dense. The ocean floor varies in depth, but Everest would likely sink until it reached some level of equilibrium, depending on how much of its base gets buried in ocean sediments. However, parts of it might still remain above water, forming a truly insane island that would put anything in the Maldives to shame. So, let's say enough of Everest remains above sea level to still be considered a climbable mountain. What would it be like? Well, first off, the entire lower portion would be constantly battered by waves, eroding it over time. Think of how sea cliffs get worn down by the ocean, but now apply that to a mountain that wasn't built for this kind of abuse. Over centuries, the lower sections of Everest would crumble, possibly creating massive underwater landslides, sending debris tumbling down into the deep sea. The upper sections, though, would remain Everest-like, but with a twist, weather patterns would be totally different. Instead of the dry, frigid conditions of the Himalayas, the mountain would now be dealing with a whole new climate, shaped by oceanic winds and humidity. Snow might still cap the peak, but lower elevations could become lush with plant life, creating bizarre new ecosystems. Imagine tropical trees growing partway up Everest while the peak remains covered in ice. Nature's version of a climate mashup. One of the most fascinating things about this scenario is how marine life would interact with the new Everest. Over time, coral reefs could start forming around its submerged base, turning it into an underwater paradise for marine biodiversity. The slopes of Everest could become home to deep-sea creatures that thrive in these unique environments, while seabirds, seals, and maybe even penguins, if we placed it near the southern hemisphere, could make a home on its rocky outcroppings. And let's talk about the human factor. Would people try to climb Ocean Everest? Of course they would. You just know some extreme adventurers would turn this into the ultimate bucket list challenge. Imagine divers scaling the submerged lower sections before switching to rock climbing gear once they break the surface. It would be part scuba adventure, part mountaineering nightmare. Now, here's where things get a bit more dramatic. The ocean is a finely tuned system, with currents that regulate climate and weather all over the planet. Dropping the tallest mountain on Earth into the middle of this system would absolutely throw things off. Could create new ocean currents, altering temperatures in unexpected ways. In the worst-case scenario, it could even mess with global weather patterns. Imagine hurricanes forming in places they never used to, all because we decided to relocate a mountain. Speaking of weather, Everest's new location would mean totally different atmospheric conditions. Without the Himalayan range blocking wind patterns, storms could slam into the mountain with unprecedented force. Everest might see more rainfall than ever before, and depending on its latitude, the whole structure could erode much faster than it does in its current home. So, what have we learned from this ridiculous yet strangely fascinating thought experiment? Well, for one, moving Everest into the ocean would cause immediate global chaos, tsunamis, ecosystem destruction, and mass panic. But if we survived the initial disaster, things would eventually stabilize. We'd be left with the world's most epic island, a bizarre mix of mountain and marine environments, and a completely new landmark for adventurers to obsess over. Would Everest survive in the long term? Probably not in the way we know it today. The ocean is relentless, and over time, it would reshape the mountain into something unrecognizable. But for a brief moment in geological history, we'd have the ultimate mashup of land and sea towering peak rising from the depths, daring humanity and nature to figure out what to do with it. And with that, I'll leave you with one final thought. If we could move mountains, what other absurd geological rearrangements should we attempt next? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this little deep dive, again, pun totally intended, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more mind-bending scientific hypotheticals. Until next time, keep questioning the impossible.